I told you a story about Ward 6 last week. If you haven't heard that story yet, I want you to stop this video and go watch that one first because it's our most important story this year and also because this video contains spoilers about that story. Well, it turns out Dr. Punderly might be more than just the director of risk at Glencroft Psychiatric. He might actually be the owner of Glencroft Psychiatric. His name is listed on Glencroft's property tax documents. But don't worry, he's careful not to associate himself publicly with the hospital. After all, Dr. Pendleton doesn't use email. Not until now. Sources tell us there is a hidden folder inside Glencroft. 5. After Amanda Clark died, her grieving colleagues found comfort in one another. That is until they were served with subpoenas demanding they hand over their phones and laptops. He cornered her in a supply closet and forcibly touched her. The hospital's own description calls it, quote, a highly escalated situation. Her ankle buckled under his weight. She fell and fractured her knee. The patient was charged with battery. The nurse had surgery, then quit. The young nurse suffered bruises and cuts to her arm. She was placed on paid administrative leave, then pressured to resign. The patient who attacked her remains at Glencroft. He was charged with a misdemeanor and given probation. The nurse suffered cuts above her left eye. The patient was charged with aggravated battery. The nurse had stitches, then returned to work. What was Amanda working on? Who was she talking to before her death? The nurse required skin grafting for second-degree burns. The patient was charged with assault. The nurse had a doctor's visit, then returned to work. The nurse bruised several ribs. The patient was charged with battery. The nurse had surgery, then returned to work. She was hired as an RN at Glencroft in March 2022. On her first day on the job, she was assigned to Ward 6. That same day, she reported concerns about a patient. Their goal is to force hospitals to acknowledge the problem of workplace violence in mental health facilities. Since going public, they've won some big victories. First, they lobbied for the installation of panic buttons in every patient room. Second, they demanded surveillance cameras in every common area. Third, they requested body cams for every officer that works security at the hospital. And finally, they wanted a promise from the administration to never retaliate against a whistleblower. Hospital officials agreed to all of those demands. 2 weeks later, she reported concerns about another patient. Is Ward 6 real? Maybe not by name, but by horror. On July, she was involved in an altercation with an aggressive patient. She complained to her manager, then reported the incident herself. On August, Maria clocked in for the overnight shift at Ward 6. Security footage shows she scanned her badge once, but she never exited the stairwell. The hospital claims she walked off the job. But Maria's car remained parked in her assigned spot for 2 weeks. No one from the hospital called her family. They found out about her disappearance through social media posts. The hospital refused to release her personnel file. But sources tell us Maria was reprimanded for falling behind on her charting. She was threatened with termination. 2 weeks after she vanished, her family discovered her ID under the pillow of an aggressive patient. It was torn to pieces, but they pieced it together and contacted the hospital. That same day, security footage shows that patient entering the hospital gift shop. He used Maria's ID to buy snacks, then left the premises without paying. He was captured on a surveillance camera walking toward the woods near the hospital. Police searched those woods. They questioned the patient, but they haven't recovered any trace of Maria. Her case is still open, but her family has given up hope. They say the hospital failed to protect her, failed to call her family, and failed to care. They say Glencroft killed Maria Elkins. The nurse had a doctor's visit and then returned to work. As it turns out, Amanda was secretly working on a second file, one that wasn't accessible to the hospital administration. It was a record of the deaths of the hospital. That file was loaded with pictures, videos, incident reports, and emails. She suffered deep lacerations to her right eyebrow. The patient was charged with aggravated battery. The nurse had stitches, then returned to work. The patient was charged with felony battery. The nurse was fired. She was making workers' comp claims for PTSD, depression, anxiety, and insomnia. She scraped her knee and tore a ligament in her shoulder. The patient was charged with battery. The nurse had surgery and then returned to work. The nurse had stitches and physical therapy, then quit. Amanda gathered them all onto a flash drive and hid it in an unmarked envelope. She sent it to a journalist, telling them to publish its contents only after she was dead. And just hours before her death, Amanda emailed that package to 3 people, 2 of whom were sitting reporters. But those journalists were not interested in the story of Glencroft Psychiatric. So Amanda put her trust in a 3rd reporter. Fortunately, that reporter had access to resources this station does not. And I want to show you what they found. Using records obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, along with the records provided by Amanda, we've been able to identify the victims, determine what happened to them, and find out how Glencroft handled the fallout. Here's what we found. It's passed from night shift to night shift, documented in detail every instance of abuse and every incident where a patient is a victim. That folder is held with the highest level of confidentiality. Its existence is a note outside the hospital walls. There are 42 entries in that book, 42 redacted reports. Each one describes an incident where a member of staff was injured, beaten, or in some cases raped by a patient. Every single report was amended within 48 hours. Every victim was told to sign an NDA. But wait a minute, if the patients were incompetent, how could they be arrested? And if the staff were victims, how could they sign an NDA? To answer that question, we consulted with several lawyers who specialize in healthcare law. They explained that hospitals have broad discretion over who gets a diagnosis and who receives treatment. Once a patient walks through those doors, the hospital can label them anything they want. Incompetent, competent, sane, insane, whatever will serve them legally. That's why the state had to send him a letter the old-fashioned way, by a certified mail, like they do in the movies. It took 3 attempts, but finally someone delivered news to Dr. Pendleton that his facility was cited for deficient services. Did Dr. Pendleton read that letter? That would be reasonable. But in fact, according to sources, he immediately forwarded the letter to his attorney. Once you've watched the first video, come back here because I have 6 updates on the story of Ward 6. But all 4 of those cases have disappeared from the court docket. But when they reported the crimes of Ward 6 to their superiors, they were met with indifference, then retaliation. So, they did something drastic. They went public. Now it is being reported that there are at least 9 former Glencroft employees who say they were sexually assaulted by patients. All 9 claim they were retaliated against after reporting the assaults to their bosses. Those 9 women are now suing. Their lawyer says the hospital's pattern of covering up these crimes goes all the way to the top. They've been sealed under a mysterious veil of secrecy. Number 1. We told you how Dr. L. Penderley allegedly allowed his incompetent patients to roam free while he ordered the staff to keep quiet. Update number 2. At least 4 lawsuits have been filed against Glencroft, including a wrongful death suit filed by Natalie's family. Update no. 3. Brianna Thomas and Chloe Ramirez tried to blow the whistle. Update number 4. We told you that the staff of Ward 6 kept detailed records of the abuse that happened there, but no one outside the hospital ever saw those records. Update no. In January 2021, an 18-year-old patient at Glencroft Psychiatric ambushed a night shift nurse. On April 1, 2021, a patient threw boiling hot coffee on a nurse. In July 2021, a nurse was dragged down a hallway by a patient. In October 2021, a mentally ill man accused of having voices inside his head smashed a glass insulin bottle over a nurse's face. In December 2021, a psychotic patient with a history of violence grabbed a nurse's private parts and squeezed them so hard he left bruises. In February 2022, a patient threw a computer monitor at a nurse. In March 2022, a nurse was shoved to the ground by a patient. In May 2022, a patient repeatedly elbowed a nurse in the chest. In June 2022, a nurse was slammed to the ground by a patient, causing a concussion and knee injury. The patient was charged with battery. In June 2022, a nurse was hit in the face by a patient. She suffered a black eye. The patient was charged with battery. In July 2022, a patient punched a nurse in the face. The nurse suffered a nose injury. The patient was charged with battery. And finally, on August 12, 2022, a nurse vanished. Her name was Maria Elkins, 27 years old. That's what we learned from the secret file that Amanda trusted us with. Update note. 6. The two survivors, Brianna Thomas and Chloe Ramirez, teamed up to create a new advocacy group called Staff Against Facility Exploitation, or SAFE. So I'll ask you the same question I asked in the last video.